In a world overwhelmed by noise, a curious phenomenon is unfolding. People everywhere are rising in protest, rallying, chanting, resisting. But many can't quite explain the depth of what they're fighting for. Caught in the storm of social media outrage, echo chambers, and algorithm-fed propaganda, public anger is real, but often directionless, misinformed, or hijacked. Across campuses, courtrooms, and conflict zones, what begins as a cry for justice slowly morphs into hostility, not always rooted in truth, but in a desperate need for belonging, for clarity, for something that feels like justice in a world where justice feels absent. Yes, there is fear. Yes, there is pain. And yes, there are real grievances buried beneath the noise. But when headlines replace stories and history, when repost replace research, and when rage drowns out reason, what hope is left for peace? Today's reports dives into the layered unrest from Ukraine to United States politics, from Gaza to growing global fractures, not just to inform, but to give introspection. Do we really know what we're truly fighting for? Or have we simply become what we once stood against? Well, welcome to the Flash News. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. On the Gaza war, more than 100 humanitarian organizations have sounded the alarm about what they describe as mass starvation sweeping across Gaza. They cite disruptions in aid delivery and access to essential resources. As starvation-related deaths continue to rise, Israel, however, denies these claims, insisting it has not blocked humanitarian support. Officials cite over 958 trucks that have reportedly entered Gaza recently, but with Israel continuing military operations in northern Gaza, which it claims are targeted strikes on Hamas strongholds, many ask the question, how much aid is enough when a militant group remains embedded within civilian territories? Can humanitarian corridors truly be safe when one party in the conflict continues to operate on the ground? Well, amid this backdrop, the United States is sending its top envoy to Europe to discuss the potential for a humanitarian corridor and ceasefire talks. Yet, if the war must end through dialogue between both parties, why is the pressure to concede resting solely on only one side? Reports from Gaza's health authorities say 15 Palestinians, including 4 children, died from starvation in a single day this week. That brings the overall toll of malnutrition-related deaths to 101 since the war began. The images are heartbreaking, and the cost of siege warfare has become increasingly difficult to ignore. But if Hamas chooses to operate among civilians, using their suffering to sway international sympathy, is Israel solely to blame for the humanitarian tragedy? Well, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz added his voice to mounting international calls for Israel to halt the airstrikes and open humanitarian routes. While the intent may be peace, is it truly peace if one side is pressured to pause while the other regroups on the ground? Well, as more Western allies step in, the conversation grows more complex. Can a ceasefire hold when one actor is not bound by statehood, international accountability, or diplomatic norms? In Australia, we see Green Senator Merin Faruqi was disciplined after displaying a placard reading, "Gaza is starving. Words won't feed them. Sanction Israel." Well, while some hailed her as a voice of conscience, others criticized the move as dangerously one-sided and undermining democratic balance. Now, can we all call it courage to demand sanction against a democratic state fighting for its security while turning a blind eye to the tactics of a designated terrorist group? In the court of global public opinion, has symbolism begun to outweigh substance? Well, if two parties wage war, Why is one held solely accountable? This question continues to echo through diplomatic halls and social media. While in a move stirring global debate, Columbia University has also suspended and expelled nearly 80 students following disruptive protests. Now, this disruptive protest happened in the school against Israel's war on Gaza. But this isn't just a story of protest. It is also one of academic boundaries, public pressure, and the thin line between free speech and disorder. In New York, Columbia University has disciplined nearly 80 students, some even losing their degrees, after months of pro-Palestinian protests escalated into library occupations and prolonged encampment. The university cited violations of academic, policy, and public safety rules after students occupied Butler Library during final exams on May 7th. Displayed protest banners and Palestinian flags inside, and allegedly defaced property with phrases like "Columbia will burn." Earlier in spring, students had also staged the so-called Revolt for Rafah encampment during Alumni Weekend, ignoring multiple orders to vacate. Columbia says these actions were not merely symbolic, they disrupted learning, defied authority, and endangered students' right to a safe academic environment, especially Jewish students who reported feeling increasingly unsafe. The penalties varied. Some students were placed on probation, others suspended for 1 to 3 years, and several were expelled or had their degrees revoked. The university emphasized that decisions were made after judicial reviews based on each student's involvement and disciplinary record. This crackdown comes amid heightened national security and scrutiny. Columbia is currently negotiating with the United States government to restore nearly $400 million in frozen federal funding, withheld over allegations of unchecked anti-Semitism. In response, the university has banned unauthorized encampment and mass protests and adopted stricter definitions of hate speech on the federal guidelines. Now, the crackdown has sparked a new debate about moral dissent and academic freedom in the United States universities. Yet, when that dissent veers into open support for groups classified as terror organizations, we wonder, should institutions not act to uphold academic neutrality and students' safety? Or student activists argue that they were exercising their rights to protest injustice, especially the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But Columbia insists, when protest invades academic spaces, defaces property, and shuts down finals, when does protest stop being peaceful and start becoming quite unlawful? While much of the world continues to condemn Israel's action in Gaza, critics argue that there is a growing trend of one-sided outrage, sparing little attention for Hamas's ongoing role in perpetuating the conflict. Now, if it takes two parties to end a war, why is global condemnation falling disproportionately on only one? For institutions like Columbia, the stakes are high. Balancing moral protest with academic order and freedom of expression with community safety is no easy task. But in today's climate, where activism often blurs with anarchy, can universities afford to be silent spectators, or must they draw the line somewhere? Well, the world seems focused almost exclusively on Israel's action. Civilian deaths in Gaza rightly provoke outrage, yet where is the equal scrutiny of Hamas's decision to embed within hospitals, within neighborhoods, and within schools? If it takes two to forge peace, why is only one party asked to stand down, comply, and be condemned? But then the hunger in Gaza is quite real, and it is a sad story, whoever the case is. In Gaza, a senior civil defense official has reportedly entered day 3 of a hunger strike to bring attention to the suffering of his people. His call for global solidarity urges others, especially Western citizens and leaders, to join in protest through hunger strikes of their own. But then what changes if public activism fails to account for the layers of complexity in the conflict? Can empathy exist without bias? In New York as well, protests saw hundreds rallying against what they call the Liberate Starvation in Gaza. These voices, loud, emotional, and often one-sided, reflect a growing unrest in Western capitals. But where are the protests against hostage-taking, rocket launches, or the use of civilian shields by Hamas? Why does outrage seldom flow both ways? In Tehran, Iran's newly elected president, Masoud Pezeshkian, warned Israel that his country is ready for any war that Israel might bring, while affirming commitments to its nuclear programs, which he insists is for peaceful purposes. His tone was unmistakably defiant. As Israel grapples with growing regional threats and international criticism, one wonders, how does a nation defend its people while navigating both diplomatic minefields and physical warfare? Well, for the first time since Russia's full-scale invasion over 3 years ago, we see that Ukraine is witnessing major anti-government protests, not from separatist enclaves or foreign agents, but from its own citizens. And this is away from Gaza and onto the Ukraine-Russian war. We see thousands flooded the streets of Kyiv, Lviv, and Kharkiv this week. Many of them young people, outraged by President Volodymyr Zelensky's controversial move to curb the independence of Ukraine's key anti-corruption bodies, NABU and SAPO, the same institutions once held up as symbols of democratic reform and Ukraine's path towards EU integration. And obviously, the people are not having it. The reaction to that is what you see next. Asking that President Zelensky vetoes the law. Veto the law is heard in their continuous chant. While the president argues these reforms are necessary to streamline governance in wartime, protesters say they're a betrayal of the very values Ukraine claims to defend. And as pressure mounts at home, another front opens abroad. In Istanbul, Russian and Ukrainian delegates sat down for the third round of direct peace talks since the start of this year. These discussions, held on July 23rd, come just days after the United States President Donald Trump issued a 50-day ultimatum to Moscow: make peace or face what he called very severe tariffs. Yet despite the high stakes, the talks barely lasted an hour. While both sides agreed to a large-scale prisoner exchange involving over 1,200 detainees, there was little movement on the ceasefire. So amid war fatigue, internal dissent, and faltering diplomacy, one has to ask, can a country truly defend freedom abroad if its people feel that freedom is eroding at home? Well, away from the wars around the globe and onto the United States politics, we're seeing a bold shift on Wednesday. President Trump sought to pivot attention away from the Epstein scandal provoked by renewed interest in sealed documents and the Department of Justice actions involving Ghislaine Maxwell by calling for the Department of Justice to investigate former President Barack Obama. Speaking in the Oval Office alongside the Philippines leader, Trump labeled the investigation into Epstein a witch hunt, accusing Obama not only of wiring intelligence agencies for political gain, but of orchestrating a coup during the 2016 election.
Just a continuation of the witch hunt. The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold, Tulsi Gabbard. What they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up to 2020 of the election, they tried to rig the election and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences for that. You know, when we caught Hillary Clinton, I said, you know what? Let's not go too far here. It's the ex-wife of a president, and I thought it was sort of terrible. And I let her off the hook, and I'm very happy I did. But it's time to start, after what they did to me, and whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people. Obama's been caught directly. So people say, oh, a group. It's not a group. It's Obama. His orders are on the paper. The papers are signed. The papers came right out of their office. They sent everything to be highly classified. Well, the highly classified's been released. And what they did in 2016 and in 2020 is very criminal. It's criminal at the highest level.
Well, he pointed to newly declassified documents from Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, which he and allies claim reveal irrefutable proof of a conspiracy. The move has energized MAGA voices like Steve Bannon to demand prosecutions. Obama's team responded sharply, dismissing the allegations as bizarre and unfounded. But Trump's tactic to shift focus from Epstein to alleged wrongdoing by Obama is stirring debate. Is it legitimate political shadow boxing or a dangerous distraction from legal questions surrounding Epstein? It is a critical question that is left unanswered. But then in another development, in a sweeping memo signed by Secretary Rubio, the Trump administration has told the United States embassies to shut up about foreign elections unless there is a clear and compelling United States interest. Gone are the days of lecturing other nations on democracy. Instead, diplomats will now stick to congratulating winners and outlining shared policy government and policy goals. Now, critics say this move risks abandoning American moral leadership, but supporters argue that it's time to respect national sovereignty and stop preaching to others while ignoring America's own backyard. Now, the State Department is pulling back from commenting on or criticizing elections overseas unless there is a clear and compelling United States foreign policy interest in doing so. Well, this new guidance issued to all United States embassies and consulates abroad says that those outposts should refrain from issuing statements that invoke any particular ideology, and that what they say must be in line with President Donald Trump's stated position that the United States will respect the sovereignty of all foreign nations. But uninterestingly, it has been in the news that French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife, Brigitte, have taken the rare step of filing a 218-page defamation lawsuit in Delaware against conservative commentator and podcaster Candace Owens. They accuse Owens of waging a campaign of global humiliation via her podcast series Becoming Bridget, in which she asserted that Brigitte Macron was born male under the name Jean-Michel Trongnier.
It is time for you to wake up. So we will start from the top here with a photo of Brigitte Macron. Real name, Jean-Michel Trongnier. That person that you are looking at on the right is not a woman. Okay. Here is a photo, by the way. Just over the years, Jean-Michel Trongnier, as he became Brigitte, as I said, the evidence for this is overwhelming. That second photo, I believe they found a photo of him at a pride parade when he was just living as a homosexual.
Oh, well, the Macrons say Owens ignored multiple retraction requests and even sold T-shirts, mocking the First Lady's identity. They allege that their public reputation and emotional well-being has been irreparably harmed. They're now seeking a jury trial and punitive damages, underscoring the seriousness of their claim under the United States defamation law, especially given the requirement to prove actual malice. Owens, however, calls the lawsuit a First Amendment showdown and a desperate attempt to suppress free speech and independent journalism. She argues that the case represents a foreign government's attempt to silence her. Owens argues that she's simply asking questions and exercising journalistic inquiry. Legal analysts on APT had to say about the lawsuit against Candace Owens slamming its viability. Well, this is what that legal analyst on APT had to say about it.
I think that President Macron is going to have a very difficult time with this libel suit. And the reason for that is really simple. Under U.S. law, public officials are required to prove actual malice, knowledge of falsity, reckless disregard for the truth. In his lengthy complaint, he has certainly alleged that on the part of this podcaster, but I think he's also probably not giving enough deference to the fact that courts in the United States grant broad discretion to individuals to comment on public officials.
Well, critics and legal analysts, other critics actually, and legal analysts warned that such defenses may not hold if the Macrons can prove what the United States law calls actual malice, that is knowingly spreading falsehood or showing reckless disregard for the truth. But then with all this heat going on about the Candace Owens, she seems to be chill in an air-conditioned room because this hasn't even fazed her in the slightest. As a matter of fact, she's doubling down on her claims that the First Lady of France is indeed a man, backing it with some outcomes of her research. Let's take a listen.
The life of Candace Owens, it works like this. I wake up, I stretch, I have a cup of coffee, and then I am served with a lawsuit. I think that's the morning routine, my friends. That is clearly my morning routine. It is so effortless. And today I have been sued by the First Lady Man of France. And I'm surmising here that that crisis PR team was the one that gave them this advice. After they lost against Amandine Roy, Natasha Ray, they probably said, file another lawsuit. We know you can't win that lawsuit, but it doesn't matter. We just need you to file the lawsuit for the sake of press, so that you can again say to people, well, it's not true because look, I'm suing Candace Owens. If you need any more evidence that Brigitte Macron is definitely a man, it is just what is happening right now. The idea that you would file this lawsuit is all of the proof that you need.
Well, as this lawsuit plays out, it highlights a growing tension in the digital media age between what's protected as free speech and what crosses the line into defamation and character assassination. And it raises the broader question, when does controversial speech become weaponized misinformation? And at what point does provocative content tip into actionable defamation? Well, I guess this is one case that will help us find that out. Meanwhile, another high-stakes political battle is heating up, this time on American soil. A United States federal appeal court has just struck down President Donald Trump's attempt to revoke birthright citizenship for children born to undocumented immigrants or temporary visa holders. The controversial move made earlier this year through Executive Order 14160 sought to reinterpret the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which currently guarantees citizenship to anyone born on American soil. Trump's executive order argued that the phrase "subject to the jurisdiction thereof" should not apply to the children of non-citizens, and that allowing them automatic citizenship encourages illegal immigration and so-called birth tourism. But the Ninth United States Circuit Court of Appeals disregarded and disagrees that, ruling the order unconstitutional and reaffirming that the 14th Amendment protects all individuals born in the United States, regardless of their parents' legal status. The court cited long-standing legal precedent, including the 1898 Wong Kim Ark case, which confirmed that birthright citizenship is a constitutional guarantee, not a policy that can be changed at the discretion of a sitting president. The court also warned that allowing such a drastic reinterpretation of the Constitution through executive action alone would dangerously expand presidential power and undermine the very legal foundation of citizenship in America. This decision is a major legal setback for the Trump administration, which has made immigration reform a cornerstone of its policy agenda. Supporters of the executive order argues that it is necessary to tighten loopholes in the system and discourage abuse of United States citizenship laws. But critics say that the move is part of a broader attempt to chip away at constitutional protections for immigrants and minorities, using executive authority in ways that defy legal norms and democratic checks and balances. Well, the case is expected to escalate to the Supreme Court, where the final interpretation of the 14th Amendment and what it means to be born American may ultimately be decided. Together, these two stories, one involving the French First Family's fight to defend their name, and the other challenging the fundamental meaning of citizenship in the United States, only captures the complexities of modern political life. Whether it is about the limits of free expression in the age of viral media, or the legal boundaries of presidential power. They ask listeners to consider the values their democracies are built on and the real-world consequences when those values are tested. Well, President Trump unveiled a massive trade deal with Japan this week, complete with a 15% tariff on Japanese exports, with his signature America First approach. Trump says this deal ensures fairness for United States workers and industries. Supporters argue he's leveling the playing field. Critics say it is destabilizing global markets. But Trump insists tariffs are a muscular tool in trade negotiations. The question hanging now is it economic patriotism or protectionism that risks global stability? Well, we'll leave you to answer that. And over to Asia. Taiwan's politics are taking center stage with a colorful twist. Giant yellow trucks painted with cartoon bears sipping boba tea cruise through Taipei, blasting speeches from lawmakers. Emotional rallies complete with rock bands spring up outside metro stations as rival camps jostle for influence level attention. At first glance, it is festival-like, but just beneath the surface lies something deeper. Voters are engaging in recall votes for 24 legislators in a bid to reshape the legislature's balance. Passion is high, but is the energy really rooted in meaningful civic engagement or a spectacle of social media-driven fervor? Well, Taiwanese citizens are caught between vibrant democracy and the risk of superficial mobilization, demonstrating how modern politics can quite blur into performance. Meanwhile, a sudden and deadly flare-up has erupted on the Thai-Cambodian border. On July 24th, at least 11 civilians and one Thai soldier were killed, with dozens more wounded, in some of the most intense clashes seen in over a decade. According to Thai officials, the violence broke out after a landmine injured Thai troops, prompting Cambodia's military, reportedly backed by drone surveillance and heavy artillery, to open fire near the ancient Tam Wen Tom temple. Thailand responded by launching airstrikes with F-16 jets on what it identified as Cambodian military positions. Each country accused the other of first shots. Diplomatic ties have cratered. Ambassadors were expelled, land crossings shut down, and some 40,000 Thai civilians evacuated. But these contrasting scenes reveal a global truth. In Taiwan, democracy dances on the surface, but probe deeper and you find complex questions about populism, political identity, and the limits of spectacle in public life. In Southeast Asia, ancient territorial disputes and fragile diplomacy have erupted into real-world violence and suffering. Both stories only remind us whether it is a campaign or a conflict. Superficial narratives often mask deeper dangers, and true democracy cannot thrive without clarity, accountability, and peace. Well, as the dust settles across headlines from Gaza's humanitarian siege and Ukraine's internal crises to the United States courtroom battles and global influencers in legal crossfires, one thing remains clear. Beneath every protest and policy lies a deeper truth. People crave justice, security, and a sense of order. But without context, without clarity, even the most passionate calls can spiral into misguided fervor. Well, that brings us to the end of the Flash News, and thank you for watching. For untold stories from the home front, do not forget to tune into Undaunted coming up at 8 p.m. Amba time. Until next time, do have a pleasant day.